Okay, I'm gonna slap a quick hot take alert on this before we get started because my next statement is bound to ruffle some feathers. I like Bill Nye. Say what you will about the man, but I have no doubt that he has good intentions. He's a big fan of dad jokes, and he really enjoys science, which is something he and I have in common. And I also respect him quite a bit, because he's done more than most people to popularize science for the general public. It doesn't matter what country you live in, or what decade you grew up in, scientific literacy is important, and no one's gonna change my mind about that. I'm a firm advocate for science education in schools. I know a lot of people like to complain that they're probably not gonna use the math or science they learn at a job, which is fair, because they probably won't. So I'm all for more practical curriculum material like learning how to do your taxes or how to fix a car engine. But not knowing how the world around you works and just saying I'd rather be ignorant because it's easier is just something I don't agree with, I'm sorry. The mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. I don't care if it's a fucking meme, you should know that. You should have at least some vague idea of how plants make their own food and how they use that to make oxygen that we breathe every day. Like, we need that to survive. Long story short, I think science is rad. Although I can't be certain of every single factor that led me to pursue physics and engineering after high school, I can say with certainty that if it weren't for shows like The Magic School Bus and Popular Mechanics for Kids, I probably wouldn't have been nearly as interested in my science courses during high school. But of course, I wouldn't dare forget to mention every student's favorite substitute teacher, that rolling TV cart thing with the belt strap. I'm sure there's a name, I don't know it. Plus a random episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy that was tangentially related to whatever unit we were learning at the time. This show was basically legendary for students in North America, and I'm not trying to oversell that. If you never grew up with Bill Nye in school, you can't even begin to imagine the cult-like adoration we had for this man. A Bill Nye episode meant we could stop listening to our teacher mumble on about capillaries and just watch Bill Nye do wacky shit for half an hour. It was great. It was sometimes the highlight of our day. Sometimes we could even convince our teacher to let us watch 2, and that turned out to be like 90% of our 75-minute class. You know those stories about kids actually chanting, Bill, 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 Bill? Like, those are real. And you know what? Bill Nye the Science Guy was often better at teaching than the people being paid to show us an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy. At least in terms of delivery and presentation, and sometimes even preparation, Bill Nye far surpassed any lesson I ever got in middle or high school. The enthusiasm Bill had for the subject matter was contagious. The show had a great host, lots of variety, made complex topics accessible, and it didn't take itself too seriously. Plus, its sense of humor lines up surprisingly well with today's standards, which includes a lot of snappy editing and a lot of recycling the same few joke formats over and over, which, if you didn't realize, that's kind of what memes are. Recently, Bill launched his new Netflix series, Bill Nye Saves the World, pitched as a sort of grown-up version of his previous show. And it's not good. It's not very good at all. It's quite bad, actually. There's a lot of different conflicting elements at play that all contribute to a program that is neither entertaining nor especially informative. And a lot of it comes down to Bill's own public persona that he's built for himself. What's most disappointing about his new show is that although it was clearly intended to be more adult-oriented, it comes off as preachy, dismissive, patronizing, and less in touch with its audience than a show from 1993 does today. This will be the first video in a 3-part series that will be taking a look at Bill Nye, the man, the character, and everything in between. The line gets blurry sometimes. Part 1 covers the context surrounding Bill and science in popular culture, so science, comedy, and hot garbage fires. Part 2 is an in-depth analysis of what made the show Bill Nye the Science Guy resonate with so many people. In other terms, passion, focus, and 19 Emmy Awards. And finally, Part 3 is a deconstruction of Bill Nye Saves the World, a conflicting mess of ego, fist bumps, and pandering. This is a bit more ambitious than my usual content, and I don't want to call it political because it's only kind of political, but it goes some places that are a bit more contentious than video games, if you can believe that. So please feel free to leave feedback and questions and comments and concerns, because I will try to address it in future videos or in the comments, because there's a lot to unpack here and I want to get it right. But now let's get some context on who exactly is Bill Nye. Bill was born back in 1955 and attended Cornell University, where he studied mechanical engineering and later graduated with a bachelor's degree in science. Ignoring his honorary doctorates that he got for just basically being famous, this is his only formal post-secondary education credential, which is a key point that many of his detractors latch onto. A lot of critics constantly try to bring up the fact that Bill isn't technically a scientist, and if semantics get you really hot and bothered, then you do you. I'm not going to try and get too involved with this debate. The general consensus is that because he doesn't perform current research, Bill Nye is not so much a scientist as he is a science educator. But those criticisms often try to completely dismiss Bill as an academic, even though he has done lots of good work in the private sector. He helped to develop the hydraulic pressure resonance suppressor first used in Boeing airplanes, and it's still used today. It's essentially the device that counteracts the oscillations due to engine operation in airplanes, so it stabilizes the aircraft. He was also part of the NASA team that designed the sundial device used on the Mars rover for orientation purposes. Just because he doesn't perform current research doesn't mean he isn't qualified to work on or talk about specific subjects. This scene from an episode of Stargate Atlantis, where he cameoed as himself, summarizes the situation pretty well.
Just give me 2 seconds to say
all wrong. Watch who you're correcting, science guy. My PhD is not honorary.
Hey, look, I'm an engineer. I can do math. Just listen to my...
I have been listening to you.
The term engineer has wildly varying significance in different parts of the world, and it's often the punchline of a lot of STEM jokes, particularly when physicists are involved. Here in Canada, it's taken far more seriously than it is in the US, and you can be fined by the governing board of your province if you claim to be an engineer when in reality you aren't. I get pretty triggered, for good reason, when people shit-talk engineers. Both my parents are engineers, and I'm studying it, so I think I'm justified when I get fired up about people dismissing an entire professional field just because of elitist nonsense. Bill is a smart guy, and yes, he is in fact more of a scientist than Sarah Palin. But that doesn't mean he should be treated as some sort of end-all be-all science wizard. Bill Nye has a bit of an ego problem, which is a result of both his fans building him up to be more than he really is, and him embracing that artificial and unearned reputation. Celebrity worship is a dangerous cycle for everyone involved. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's jump back a little bit so we can understand exactly where Bill's fame came from. During his years as a contractor, he moonlighted as a stand-up comic, and eventually quit his day job as an engineer to write and perform on the comedy sketch show Almost Live. I watched a few different clips from this time period, and I think I can safely say that Bill is just not cut out to be a stand-up comic. His first televised appearance is downright embarrassing, filled with nonsensical punchlines, prop humor involving wrenches, and him repeatedly saying, "My name is Bill," like a kindergartner on his first day of school.
I had an idea, as I often do. You could maybe go to the driver's license place, write them one check, $27. And before you take the test, they get you drunk. See, first of all, the test would be more realistic. But the main thing is, when the cop picks you up, you'll look like the picture. That's my closing thing.
Bill, Bill Nye, come on, let's go.
My name is Bill. My name is Bill. Am I moving too fast? My name is Bill.
Come on over, have a seat,
Studio
Bill.
audience.
Bill just doesn't have the confidence and restraint required to pull off the deadpan humor he's attempting here. On the other hand, Bill is infinitely more successful when he's trying to play a goofy, quirky, larger-than-life personality. Take his Speedwalker character from Almost Live. He's a superhero whose only power is perfect speedwalking skills, and he does this in what looks like a diaper. It's so ridiculous, and it only works because Bill is completely committed to the role. Bill is an energetic, silly human being, and that's why the Speedwalker character works for him. That's important point number one. Bill's comedy is at its best when he's playing over-the-top roles. He does not do casual or aloof. Important point number two, the best performance you'll get out of Bill is one where he isn't in front of a live audience. Bill is most reliable in live segments when he can work off other people. He lets them do a lot of the brunt work while he jumps in with the occasional quip.
I have a cousin who's a physicist, and she told me, there's zero chance that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
But
So, sir, hang on. You ever seen the show Jeopardy?
yeah.
So
Well,
can
I have. It's in the ride too.
Yeah. So, if you would express this in the form of a question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what? Okay.
But when he has to run the whole operation himself, it becomes apparent that he's a bit too all over the place to consistently nail the delivery on his comedy routines. See, there's this obscure neat trick in film production called shooting multiple takes. Basically, you film the same thing a few times and keep the best shot. It's crazy, right? It's almost like cheating. Pre-written, i.e. not improv, and pre-recorded segments are where Bill excels. We'll be coming back to these points in the future, so make sure to keep them at the back of your mind. Now, during his time with Almost Live, Bill got his own segment where he executed science experiments that ranged from, "Hey, that's pretty neat," to, "Wow, that really didn't work at all."
This balloon, then, let's watch.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
Wow.
This is actually where his famous nickname originates from. Later, he would play the role of Dr. Emmett Brown's assistant on 1991's Back to the Future animated series, the success of which likely motivated him to start working on what would turn out to be his most successful project. It was around this time that he put together the pilot for a show that would eventually become Bill Nye the Science Guy, which was picked up for production by a division of PBS and distributed by Buena Vista, a division of Disney. The show received crucial funding support from both the National Science Foundation and the US Department of Energy, and due to its educational format, it was a highly desired program for airing both on public and commercial networks. All in all, Bill Nye the Science Guy was nominated for 23 Emmy Awards, won 19 of them, and ran from 1993 to 1998 with a total of 100 half-hour episodes. Not a bad legacy. Nowadays, I'm pretty sure the show isn't regularly aired anymore, but rather primarily shown in schools as supplemental learning material. Like I mentioned earlier, this show induces a cult-like appreciation in kids and teenagers. Over the years, this genuine appreciation and a combination of nostalgia resulted in Bill landing dozens of cameos on shows, documentaries, and even theme park rides, many of which he ended up playing himself. Two of the most notable hosting gigs he got were for 100 Greatest Discoveries and The Eyes of Nye, both of which are great and I recommend giving a look if you're into Bill doing some solid technical narration at a higher level than he did on Science Guy. Bill's presentation skills aren't nearly as inconsistent as his comedy skills, and he's got the ideal tone of voice for conveying complex topics in a simple manner. I've read a bit of his book on evolution, and although it's not a subject I have a particular interest in, he has a fairly engaging writing style that is extremely accessible. As a science educator, Bill is fantastic. Even if he may not be an expert in a given field, he's very effective when it comes to giving a layman's terms overview. But as far as I'm concerned, that's as far as Bill should try and go. He's a passionate advocate for scientific literacy surrounding the issues of space exploration, climate change, vaccines, and evolution, and that is not a bad thing. That's actually a pretty good thing. He wants children to be informed enough to draw their own conclusions rather than just adopting their parents' views, and science education provides them with the tools necessary to do just that. On a scale from not rad to rad as fuck, wanting people to be informed about increasingly relevant environmental issues is pretty rad. What's not rad is appearing on every talk and morning news show you get an invite to and presenting yourself as the official spokesperson for all of science. Bill is not a climate scientist, and for some reason he's the person the media calls when they need someone to debate an even more unqualified political pundit. Remember once presidential candidate Dr. Ben Carson? By all accounts, a brilliant neurosurgeon, but he also believes the pyramids were built by Joseph to store grain, among many other controversial statements. Now let me be clear, I think it's a complete disservice to Bill to say that he's comparable to someone who honestly sounds insane half the time, but I think it illustrates my point. Bill is knowledgeable about a lot of subjects, yes, but he primarily specializes in a select few. He's not the one doing the current research, and as such, he isn't in a position to provide the most up-to-date and most relevant information. If he was, then he would be able to shut down questions and rebuttals designed to mislead and reframe a debate that should be pretty cut and dry. Like I said earlier, Bill does not excel in a live format, and debates are even trickier because he isn't assertive enough to take on people who make their living by twisting the truth. The evolution versus creationism debate with Ken Ham was the first example of this, and may have done more harm than good for the scientific community, as Bill's comparatively dry and less charismatic evidence-based performance did very little to persuade anyone who was on the fence. Really, Bill's first mistake was drawing attention to Ham by acknowledging him in the first place, and the second was trying to win the debate as a school teacher rather than a politician. Science doesn't win debates on its own, at least not directly. Charisma wins debates. It can drive innovation, save lives, and inspire creative thinking, but science is not going to change the opinion of people who have been taught their whole lives to trust their feelings rather than their senses. Nobody who regularly watches cable news political pundits is going to be swayed by numbers that go against their preferred narrative when they can easily go online and find someone who's cherry-picked ones that don't challenge their current viewpoint. And Bill playing into the whole us versus them mentality by engaging in political debates is dangerous, because the more he appears to be the face of science, the easier it is for people to dismiss science because they find it easy to dismiss him. The comedian with a mechanical engineering background preaching about climate change. It's understandably easy for his opponents to scoff at. What Bill should be doing is focusing on education. Now, he does do a fair amount of that, but I think he should just go all in, focus entirely on that. Making science seem fun, making science seem rewarding to kids like he used to do, motivating people on behalf of scientists and convincing the public that it's something that deserves funding, like his role at the Planetary Society, for example. I mean, I think it's a bit questionable that Bill, of all people, is the CEO of the Planetary Society given his background, but at least the point of that organization is to advocate for space research funding. That's how real change happens, by promoting science as something valuable to everyone, not as one side of a debate. The website you're watching this on, the microphone I'm recording this on, the light in this room so I can see, that's all science. Without science, we have none of this. Because science is not an opinion, it reflects reality, and willfully ignoring science is the same as willfully ignoring the world around you. People making uninformed decisions, whether it be cutting funding for renewable energy or not getting their kid vaccinated, will have dangerous consequences that will affect millions of people for years to come. But change doesn't happen by getting into heated arguments with people in suits who are so set in their ways that they're more likely to believe that Obama was secretly born in Kenya than that the ice caps are melting. Let me be clear, celebrity scientists like Bill and Neil deGrasse Tyson are important to the future of science because they convince people who would otherwise not engage with science to do just that. But rather than overstepping their bounds and making themselves frontmen, they should be promoting the work of scientists from all fields: climate, biology, physics, chemistry, medicine, everything. At least so we can end up with more than just a goofy guy in a bow tie as our mascot. At his heart, Bill is just a guy who digs science and wants other people to enjoy science as much as he does. And I relate to that. That's cool. It's great. Bill Nye Saves the World is the overproduced mess you get when you give a bloated budget to a guy who oversteps his qualifications and tackles issues way too big for one person in a half-hour runtime. Bill Nye the Science Guy is what happens when you take someone passionate about a subject and give them the tools they need to connect with a generation of eager young minds.
But these things that happen to you when you're a little kid influence you so much. And I'll bet you everybody in here is a science enthusiast, got excited about it before you were 10 years old. And this passion, this drive to know our place in the universe is what makes us special. It's what makes our species worthy. And with this PB&J, this passion, beauty, and joy, we can, dare I say it, change the world. Thank you.